Hi, everyone. I'm Dylan McGee, founder and executive producer of Makers. Welcome to Makers at Home Live. For those of you who were just on, thank you for coming back. We love some technical difficulties. We're here today with Angela Glover Blackwell. Today is Juneteenth Day, and we're really looking forward to this conversation. Angela Glover Blackwell has been a true friend of Makers. We're honored that she's here today, and our understanding is that this is going to be her very first Instagram Live. So you're in for a treat. Tell us again where you're from, because we love knowing where our audience is from. And I think last time I could see we had people from all over the globe, which is really exciting. Again, Kurdistan to Brooklyn. I know we have Brooklyn in the house. Okay, here we go. Let's see if Angela is here.
Now
We did it. You are worth the wait, my friend.
you were so good waiting for me. I was watching.
You know what? That's what this is all about. It's live. It's fun. That adds to the drama, right?
I was this close to panic, but here we are.
Am I right? Is this your very first Instagram Live?
Very first.
And are you never going to do it again after this experience?
I'm game. We'll see how.
We'll see how it goes. All right. So I was bragging a little bit about you. I hope I had my facts right? Howard.
Yes.
My facts were good?
Yes.
Howard graduate, UC Berkeley Law, creator of Policy Link. But what I didn't get to is you are the host of the podcast Radical Reimagination, which we're going to talk about today.
Mm-hmm.
And you and I have never spoken about this, but you appeared in a documentary that I was the executive producer of with Henry Louis Gates Jr., Many Rivers to Cross, which was about 400 years of African-American history. And you are in our final hour. And we never talked about that.
It was wonderful. It was a great series. My husband and I enjoyed it so much.
Oh, good. Okay, so I want to dive right in because, I feel like we're living in such a pivotal moment in history. We have tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people out marching. We have, CEOs making pledges left and right. We have, a white CEO, Reed Hastings, and his wife donating multi-millions to historically Black colleges. And so I guess my first question to you is, what does it mean exactly to say that Black Lives Matter?
Oh, there is so much to talk about.
I know.
One of the things that is so thrilling as a Black person about what is happening right now is to see these multiracial, multi-ethnic, multi-generational people out on the street centering Blackness. They're not just to say we want to see a few changes, but to say we are anti-racist. We have to do something about and to do something to center Blackness. When people say Black Lives Matter, what they are saying is that until in this nation, if not in this world, we understand that Black people have been put in such of oppression that until we get the root cause of that, we're not going to be in a position for any life matter.
Yeah.
If vulnerable, if the most oppressed among us don't matter, and if they matter a lot, then we can't ever get it right. So Black Lives Matter is a statement about finally getting rid of the hierarchy of human, in which some people are on the bottom rung and saying that, yes, we are going to show that we mean to be fully inclusive. Centering Blackness, centering Black people.
I'm getting goosebumps listening to you. I'm worried that the audio is no good. Or can people hear, or is it just on my phone?
All right, can you hear me now?
Yes, I think the crackling is going. All right,
All right, here we go.
Okay, so thank you for sharing that about Black Lives Matter. And you also, one of the things that's so incredible about you, there are many things, Angela, but you have lived through many movements, you know, the civil rights movement, the Black Power movement, you know, the early Black Lives Matter up until now.
Mm-hmm.
And you wrote a beautiful op-ed. I really hope everyone will go to Policy Link and read your thoughts about that. But share with us, you know, how does this compare to the other movements you've lived through? And is it different?
It's different. I can start
Yeah.
answering that question right away. It is definitely different. And I think that it's going to make a difference, which is the better question. Not just is it different, but is it going to make a difference?
Mm.
A lot of people have been asking me because, like you, they know I've been around for a while. And it's different from the civil rights movement because during the civil rights movement, what we were really trying to do was to get rid of the laws that were making it legal to discriminate against Black people. Couldn't vote, couldn't go to public accommodations, couldn't buy what you wanted to buy, couldn't get the job that you were qualified to get. That didn't solve the problem, though, because I think that we didn't, in the civil rights movement, anticipate that racism and structural racism would not just survive, but thrive afterwards. I came out of college into the Black Power movement, which was absolutely exhilarating because the Black Power movement was embracing and loving Black people and culture, and it was acknowledging that integration was not going to be the be-all and end-all, but we really needed to invest in Black creativity for entrepreneurship and Black power for leadership. The Black Power movement, though, didn't have the impact it wanted because it didn't anticipate the pushback from police. It didn't anticipate that white people would abandon the cities where Black people were starting to get power and move out into white enclaves in the suburbs and take so much with them, including power, resources, and jobs. And so this time, what makes it so different is a critique of an economy that's leaving people behind is part of what's going forward. A critique of the policing in this country that actually questions whether or not a system that developed in the South to catch runaway slaves and in the Northeast to tap down the growing power of labor can ever be the system that we can rely on for safe, healthy, thriving communities. The transformational questions are being asked, and the multiracial, multicultural, multi-generational, multi-sexual orientation nature of this movement really has all of the people who need to be pushing in the same direction doing so with a bravery, with a commitment to honesty, with a creativity and a courage of their beliefs that is lasting. We're weeks now into it with no end in sight. And what you refer to in terms of every philanthropy, most companies, lots of higher institutions, governments making their statement to be anti-racist, to be opposed to a system that is anti-Black, and to create a system that we can all believe in and thrive in, and people are asking what they can do. And the other thing they're doing is they're keeping their shoulders down when people tell them in their face with anger what they can do. In the past, when people got in their face with anger saying what you wanted to do, people ran away and said, oh, I'm not going there. People are still stepping in. I think something's going to happen this time, but it won't unless we do the work. And the work is not easy. We got to do the work.
Well, and we have to do the work. And oh, you're making me feel so hopeful because sometimes I do get worried. I'm like, how do we make sure this isn't just a moment and that this is sustained and that it's not just people saying, oh, I made Juneteenth the holiday in my company, I've checked that box. Or you know, I've been talking to a group of heads of diversity and inclusion, and they've been saying what they're hearing a lot is people just upping their unconscious bias training, right? And we know, you and I know that's not the answer. So keep me hopeful in how we're going to sustain this.
I don't know if I can keep you hopeful, but I can tell you how we're going to sustain it. And
Okay.
if you see people sustaining it, then you have every reason to be hopeful. We sustain it by continuing to organize. We sustain it by critiquing what people are doing in the names of, I got it. We have to say, it is not enough to have a meeting and talk about Blackness at work. You've got to look internally and see what has been your contribution to racial oppression and exclusion. How is it both in the way that you hire, promote, the kind of culture that you create? Is it a culture of belonging? But also, what's the business that we're in? Think about banking. Banking and financial institutions, that's a business that's been part of the problem. Locking Black families out of home ownership, and that's how you build wealth in this country. That's why Black families only have 1/10 the wealth of white families, because banks and financial institutions have not made mortgage money available to them. Locking out small businesses. Black women, entrepreneurs, start businesses at 3 times the rate of white women, but most of them are small, single person, no employees, not able to grow because banks and financial institutions and investment firms are not investing in them. You've got to ask, what's about the way we're doing business in America is keeping people down, and how do we both acknowledge it, apologize for it, but start moving in some bold directions? We all have to vote. It's so clear that voting matters. We cannot separate what we feel in our hearts from how we vote on Election Day. Combine the two. Whatever it is you're feeling in your heart right now, combine that into what you do in the voting booth. But also, keep giving money. Money is important, but think about who you're giving it to. If you see organizations that have leadership that's of color, that's Black, that's Latinx, that's Native, that's Asian, and people are centering the struggle in ways that you think are exciting, give them money so they can grow, so they can be sustained more. But also, make sure that in those private moments, when you're having dinner with family and friends, and somebody said something that is racist, that is mean, that is ignorant, use that as a moment to educate them. We all get a pit in the stomach when you have to speak to a friend or a family member about their racism, about their prejudice, about their ignorance. But if we don't call it out close in, we're not likely to act on it fully out in the world. We've got to do that, and we can all do it. If we get that feeling, that the moment continues to go, that people are changing the way they do business, that they're being open when they hear radical ideas like defund the police. Listen to folks, hear what they're saying, try to be them, try to put yourself in their shoes. And since you know that you can't, assume that if they tell you the shoes hurt, that they hurt. You can't look at the shoe and say, it doesn't look like it hurts to me. I don't care what it looks like. It's on my foot and it hurts. Listen to people. Assume they know about their shoes.
Oh my God, I have so many things I want to respond with. I mean, yes, the shoes hurt, and there are all these things, but there's also something that I want to address with you, because it's you've brought such a gift to the Makers Conference, which was talking about these things that we can see and we can do, and these conversations we can have, and money we can donate, but there's also microaggressions, right? There are these things that even, that I experience, that I have done, that I'm learning. How do we become better allies in terms of how we focus on this, on also bringing up microaggressions? I guess I'm saying it in an uneloquent way.
No, we have to really have our antenna up all the time and know that we grew up in the world, we grew up in the society, and it was full of prejudice and this hierarchy of human value that I talk about, and a sense that some people matter more than others. Know that we grew up in that society, and that when we're interacting with people, we're bringing all that baggage with us. Be sensitive to that. If somebody looks funny, don't just assume that it wasn't you. It probably was you. Think about how many times you said something and a Black person had a funny look on their face. It was about you. It was about something you said. Reflect on it. Ask them. Try to be better. Think about how to create a culture of belonging so that everybody really matters. I can remember many times in my life in which people who didn't intend to cause me harm caused me harm because they never thought about what my life was like. They never thought about what somebody else might have done or said that made them saying this thing hurt a little more. They never asked me they never apologized when they realized they had done wrong because they were too embarrassed by it. We got to educate ourselves, get over the embarrassment, be willing to be vulnerable. People who often, when you get in these conversations, this often comes from white people. Oh, I just can't stand it. This conversation is too painful. Well, if it's too painful for you to talk about it, what do you think it feels like to live it? Know that whatever discomfort you're going through, it pales in regard to what people have gone through who have suffered loss of life, indignation, had their ambitions stifled. We got to do better. And in thinking about doing better, it is so important that we have some goals for ourselves. You don't just step into life and say, oh, I'm going to do really well. You think, I'm going to do really well so that. We need to do better around issues of race so that all people can participate, prosper, and reach their full potential. So if there are people that you work with, have some goals for how the entry level workers, the frontline workers, because that's where you're going to find the concentrations of people of color. Make sure that you're creating space for people to be able to move up in those jobs, that you're creating salaries that allow people to support their families with dignity, that there are educational opportunities that people can take advantage of and be able to perhaps leave you and go someplace else, but they learn something about your company, about your world, because you were paying attention to them. Have some goals. We're not just being nice to people now. We are being respectful of people so that we can get rid of anti-Blackness, that we can be active anti-racist, and we can be part of creating the paths to the next great American story.
All right. Well, I have some goals, Angela.
Okay.
And one of mine is I found, I think being honest and transparent, as everything happened, George Floyd, Breonna, I became paralyzed in terms of I didn't know what to do. We had a makers conversation and we talked about, what this incredible woman on our team said, what are we doing as a brand? And all of a sudden I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm paralyzed because I didn't want to do the wrong thing. Every step that I was thinking, well, is that right? Is that right? And so I made a pledge to myself that I'm not going to be scared about doing the wrong thing. And I'm going to just say what's on my mind and be open to being corrected. And it's better to take a step and do something and maybe be corrected for it than to not do anything. So here's a little tiny example that you're going to, so we had a team meeting right before this call, and I wanted to open up this conversation and say, Happy Juneteenth. And someone said, well, do you say Happy Juneteenth? Is that right? And so then I was like, wait, I'm paralyzed. I'm not going to say anything, but I am going to say something. I felt like saying, to me, Juneteenth means, we're celebrating. There's so many meanings to it, but we're celebrating the end of slavery. And so to me, it's Happy Juneteenth, but I'd love your reaction to that.
Wow, I have had a lot of reactions to the fact that today is Juneteenth. Wonderful article in the New York Times yesterday or today. I never know because I get it online, so I often read it before it appears in the paper. I read it last night. Wonderful article talking about, as people are thinking about Juneteenth, don't think of it as when the Republican Party and Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. Think of it as the end of a centuries-long journey in which Black people had been struggling and fighting to break free of those chains and free themselves. And to be in that struggle means that you have to infiltrate those who have positions of influence so that they begin to be fighting with you, complicit with you, allies with you, partners with you. And you have to be able to have been doing it enough and creating the leaders so when the moment comes, they can step into it. Frederick Douglass, and the biography of Frederick Douglass and his writing, extraordinary in terms of the role he played getting to abolition. It was a wonderful way to think about the celebration of Black people with allies and others in a centuries-long struggle that finally culminated in them being able to break those chains and begin to write a new history for the country that they had helped to build. I liked that.
Mm.
I actually am not someone who's been celebrating Juneteenth. I had never even heard of Juneteenth until I was in my 20s and I was visiting Texas. And Black people we were having dinner with talked about the fact that it was Juneteenth, asked what was that, and they told me the story of it was when Black people in that part of Texas heard about the Emancipation Proclamation. And so I've been reflecting on it. And I think that it is a good thing to have moments in time where we stop and we really have to think about the history. We have to think about the truth. And we have to think about the roles of people that played in perpetuating the things that we've been trying to get rid of for a long time. I have just a bit of ambivalence about celebrating when the nation acknowledged my humanity, because I had my humanity before the nation acknowledged it. So with that caveat, I want to also embrace that anytime we lift up the true history of the nation, particularly the true history as it has to do with Native Americans who suffered through genocide and had their land stolen, Black people who were in human bondage, everybody's history needs to come out. When we're celebrating the advancement of our knowledge about who we really are and how things came to be the way they are, that's worth taking a moment and a day to be able to say, let's acknowledge these things.
So it's maybe happy Juneteenth.
I'd say let's celebrate our growing knowledge of the true history of the nation.
Okay. All right.
Happy Juneteenth.
That with you. Oh, our time has gone by so quickly and we're already almost at the end, but I want to talk about your podcast because I really want the world to know about it. And it's called Radical Imagination. And I want to read this because you challenge people to go beyond what is imaginable and envision a bold future. So I guess what does it mean, and how can I have radical imagination?
Well, the first thing I want you to do is listen to Radical Imagination. Get it wherever you get your podcast, or go to radicalimagination.us. It's been around for about 9 months, and it's putting forward the stories and ideas that are really fueling change. 9 months ago, we did one on police abolition. Many people wondered, where on earth is she getting these ideas? But look where we are now. Another one was on a federal job guarantee, thinking about how we really needed to guarantee jobs with dignity and pay so that everybody who wants to work can work. That's being talked about now in the recovery. Another one was reparations, and looked at what was happening in Georgetown, where Georgetown was making amends for having sold slaves to save Georgetown. And people are talking about reparations everywhere. So Radical Imagination is a place to go to hear about people stretching their imagination, what it's meaning, what they're up against, what progress they're making. There are lots of great ideas there. I think that this is the time for radical imagination. And it thrills me to know that people are asking, where's the edge and how do we get there?
You get there by listening to your podcast.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, Angela, it's such a treat. We have an audience that has been just sending you so many good vibes. I know that I just want to end with something that we do with everyone, which is, we didn't get to the discussion, although we still want to have it, around, the inequities that we're seeing out of COVID and how it's, disproportionately affecting the Black community, the people of color, so just quickly give me a little sense of why it is we're seeing that, and it's certainly not the virus is colorblind.
Yeah, it is really something. Robert Reich, I think, said this, that we may all be in the same storm, but we're not in the same boat. And COVID is really showing that the virus is out there, but it is hitting the people who have been most vulnerable, who have been most neglected, who are most susceptible to whatever bad things are happening, the worst. So it's no surprise that Black and Latinx people who don't have access to fresh fruits and vegetables, access to health care, have are the ones who were most vulnerable to catching the virus. And it's worse for them because they're least likely to get the medical attention that's needed, and they have other conditions. But also they're more exposed to it because they're the frontline workers. They're riding the buses, they're working in the grocery stores, they're doing all those things that put them in contact with thousands of people, not just a few. So they got sick. They're dying more. And as the economy has shut down, we realize that they're the ones who continue to be vulnerable to the disease, but they're now vulnerable to the crisis in the economy, that they've lost their jobs more. Their jobs are less likely to come back. Think how many women of color are receptionists. What's going to happen to receptionists as everybody's working from home and wondering about that? Think about how many have been childcare workers and been completely out of work. So we're not clear. It's not clear that unless we do some real restructuring of the economy, that the people who've been hurt most are going to be able to survive. And I understand that 41% of Black businesses may not reopen, small businesses. If we allow that to happen, that is a shame. And the PPP did not get to them. And so it is that systematic, baked-in racism that allows the country to operate in a racist way, whether people are carrying it in their hearts or not. It has been moved to the system, and the system is brutal. The system is brutal.
And as someone just said, the system is brutal, and your wisdom is unmatched. I mean, it's people like you who are going to get us through, who are going to give us hope, who are going to teach us how to be radical. But I also want to make sure that you're taking care of yourself. And I want to know what you've done. What are the 3 things that you've done to take care of yourself or that are keeping you through this pandemic?
So you gave me a heads up that you would ask this question. So I thought about it. And the first one, this is my family. My family helps me all the time. And when I can find a moment, I've been reading, and let me just, here's what I'm reading right now. N.K. Jemisin, The City We Became. Excellent.
Oh, excellent.
And then after everybody stops calling me and the Zoom meetings are over.
Good. I'm so happy to know there's a little bit of that in there. That is such good news. And is rosé your drink of choice?
It is one of my drinks of choice.
Good. Well, Angela, you are just a beacon of hope, a beacon of wisdom, a beacon of joy. And thank you. I know the demands on your time right now. I can only imagine how exhausted you are. It does warm my heart to know that you've got some rosé right there by your side. But
thank you.
On behalf of all of us at Makers, thank you for being here with us. And
thank you for having me.
Your very first Instagram Live.
All right.
Sending lots of love.
All right. Bye.